That is Steve Pollock. Many of you will know him. He was the outdoors editor of The Blade for a long, long time. He is an environmentalist and a naturalist, uh, and has won many awards for his work. But he is a nationally known environmentalist, nationally known. Um, he has agreed to come next Sunday and talk about plastics in our life, as to how the plastics are getting into not only our food chain but also in our cells. So this is going to be next Sunday at 12:30, and it promises to be a very exciting, informative lecture. Sometimes we close our eyes to our environment as to what is happening. So that will be a reminder for us. Uh, so next Sunday we will make some arrangements, and I think Salah is going to talk to a few of you that we'll have a lunch downstairs for the speaker. So our speaker today, finally, is one of our very own, uh, Dr. Mersiha Hadziahmetkovc. Did I butcher it up?
A little bit.
Okay. So see, I haven't been to Bosnia yet. So
Never too late.
okay. Um, she came to the center in 1998 as a refugee from the war-torn Bosnia. If you remember, the former Yugoslavia, there was uh, so much uh, damage and carnage, and unfortunately, Muslims got the brunt of it. So a lot of people left, and she and her family came to Toledo and made Islamic Center her home in 1998. She went on to Ohio State University and got her medical degree, and then she was trained as an oncologist, radiation oncologist in MD Anderson, and later the James Cancer Hospital attached with Ohio State Medical University. So she is a practicing radiation oncologist. She holds an associate professorship in the College of Medicine at the University of Toledo at the Dana Medical Center. So please welcome Dr. Mersiha. She's going to talk to us about Bosnia.
Assalamu alaikum. Hope everybody can hear me.
Not yet. No, it's not on.
Uh, Thank you so much, Dr. Hussein, for that nice introduction. Small editorial comment. We actually arrived in 1994 during the war. I left Toledo in 1998 and came back 20 years later in 2018. Thank you for the honor of the podium. Today I will talk about my home country, Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I was born in a country called Yugoslavia in 1980. And Bosnia and Herzegovina was the republic that my family lived in and hails from hundreds of years ago. So this is my title page, as you can see, that highlights some of the natural beauty of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as some of the things it's known for, like the old bridge in Mostar and the Bosnian lily, which is an official species of flower, and coat of arms from the Kingdom of Bosnia in 11th and 13th century.
Can we adjust the mic so that it can be in front of you?
Sure, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay. All right, so here we go. So this is my outline. I'll first start off with kind of the happy things before we get into the necessary, I guess, sad and miserable stuff. I really hope that this presentation will compel most of you to at least consider visiting Bosnia. we'll do a quick overview of the geography so you can kind of visually place the physical position of Bosnia and its neighbors. We'll discuss about the pre-Islamic history of Bosnia from the Paleolithic era until the 15th century, the Ottoman rule, which was the mid-15th through the late 19th century, and then Austro-Hungarian rule, which was after the fall of the Ottoman Empire up until World War I. And kind of all the hairy stuff that really starts around when the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, and just shortly before it, Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs was established. Then the Axis occupation in World War II, Socialist Federalist Republic of Yugoslavia, which is the country I was born in after World War II, the breakup of Yugoslavia starting after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of communism in Eastern Europe, the War of 1992 through 1995, which is how I ended up in the United States, and post-war Bosnia briefly. So bullet point summary, I think it's a beautiful place and it should be a must visit on probably most Muslims' bucket list, I would think. It's a beautiful country that has a plethora of opportunities for both summer and winter tourism. It has a rich and complex history. It is situated in the Balkan Peninsula, and the very word Balkan, as a noun, as a verb, means to divide a region or body into smaller, mutually hostile states or groups. So that kind of sets the context. Generally, we're known to have friendly, hospitable people, delicious food. As Muslims, you don't have to worry generally about whether the food is halal or not. Increasingly, there's the tourism industry is catering to the Muslim tourist. It's a chance to experience Europe's Jerusalem, which is Sarajevo, and maybe most importantly, I think visiting Bosnia really provides both moral and economic support to the people of Bosnia. This slide highlights some of the beautiful, natural beauty of Bosnia. The country is relatively small, maybe the size of West Virginia, and the central and eastern part is very mountainous, and northwest of the country is mostly kind of predominantly hilly, and the northeast is relatively flat and agricultural. Again, more on the same theme. This is the ancient royal capital of Bosnia, Jajce. This is actually where I was born, in the royal capital of Bosnia. And in the middle panel, you see the Neretva River, which is actually the coldest river in the world. Its temperature is 7 to 8 degrees Celsius, even in the peak of summer. This river is the river underneath the old bridge in Mostad, and it is one of the natural symbols of Herzegovina, which is the region of Bosnia that has a more Mediterranean climate. This slide highlights some of the beautiful scenes from the winter wonderland that is Sarajevo and central Bosnia. So Bosnia has a continental climate, so the summers are very hot and the winters are cold and snowy. In 1984, the year that Los Angeles hosted the Summer Olympics, the Winter Olympics were actually in Sarajevo. So that actually says something about the country that used to be Yugoslavia, to be on par with the United States to host the Olympic Games in the same year. And I don't have a memory of the Olympics. I was just 3 years old, but everybody in former Yugoslavia, that's a huge kind of feather in our cap and a point of pride that we like to highlight. The picture up here, you can see, they call Sarajevo the Europe's Jerusalem. Within 100 yards of each other, aerially, you have the main mosque, the main synagogue, the main Orthodox cathedral, and the main Catholic cathedral, all coexisting peacefully through the centuries, for the most part. And this is, the lower left panel is just a winter wonderland picture of the same kind of downtown that highlights those religious houses. This is Vučko. He was the mascot of 1984 Olympics, and these other photographs just highlight some of the winter sports that Bosnians generally follow and partake in. This is a sampling of our traditional foods. Our food is a mixture of kind of east and west, I would say. As we'll get into it in a little bit, we've been influenced by many different cultures. So we have our kebabs, but we also have our sauerkraut that we eat together. And but generally heavy on the stews, brothy soups, kind of like Eastern European, Ashkenazi Jewish people. So the food is very similar. Lots of vegetables, meat and potato. Not a lot of aromatic spices, just because we didn't that part of the world didn't have those aromatic spices. We generally cook with fresh herbs. This is probably in the lower left, these little sausages or beef kebabs, we call it chibab. This is very authentically Bosnian. And in the middle panel, this we call pita, which is a phyllo dough that's rolled into very thin paper thin layers and stuffed with different stuffings. An assortment of sweets that you can find in a Bosnian home on Eid, for example. So we have our Eastern desserts with a Bosnian spin on it. So this is Bosnian baklava. It's made different than say traditional Middle Eastern baklava. We tend to layer with walnuts between each individual layer, as opposed to kind of a lot of layers and a lot of nuts and a lot of layers. Thick, syrupy, sweetened by thick sweetened syrup. We have also more kind of traditionally European desserts, kind of cakey, torta-like desserts, which are my favorite. If anybody in this audience is interested in going on a tour of Bosnia from the United States, actually Dar es Salaam, which is the company that many of us have gone to Umrah or Hajj through, they are now offering a Bosnia and Turkey tour that's led by professional tour guides. Okay, so really quickly, this is the Wikipedia overview. Bosnia and Herzegovina, sometimes simply referred to as Bosnia, is a country in the Southeast Europe in the Balkan Peninsula, like we said. It's been there for a long time. It's had a permanent settlement since the Neolithic Age. I had to look this up. So Neolithic Age is about 4000 BC. Those are the permanent settlements, but actually the earliest human inhabitants were noted to be there even in the Paleolithic age, which is 10 to 15,000 BC. The early historical period, the Celts and the Illyrians inhabited that area. Christianity arrived in the 1st century, and by the 4th century, that area was ruled by Western Roman Empire. In the 5th century, Germanic tribes invaded that area, followed by Slavs in 6th and 7th century, who invaded, raided, and settled the area for good. So essentially, Slavic people came, these Slavic tribes, and settled. For the next few centuries, it was pretty much a struggle between, the land grab between the Kingdom of Hungary and the Byzantines. And in 11th through the 13th centuries, we actually had our own kingdom of Bosnia. That's sort of like when Bosnia, I would say, peaked. We had our own king, and the town that I was born in, that was the royal capital of that kingdom. Actually, the Ottomans came to the area in late 1300s, but it took them about 80 years to conquer the lands. And so officially in about mid 1400s, so mid 15th century, the Ottomans ruled the area, and their rule lasted about 450 years. They brought a lot of changes to the political and administrative system, introduced land reforms and class and religious distinctions, which sort of has a root of the conflict that tore the country apart in 1990s. This part of history was leveraged to divide the people along the ethnic and religious lines. The Ottoman Empire, as most of you know, declined in late 19th century, and the Treaty of Berlin gave Bosnia to Austro-Hungarians. So the Austro-Hungarians ruled that area for a few decades, and then World War I happened. World War I happened, actually World War I was started in Sarajevo when the heir to the throne of Austro-Hungary was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist, Gavrilo Princip. And then interwar was sort of like a very contentious period where especially Muslims of the indigenous European people who happened to convert during the Ottoman era to Islam were dispossessed. So they were the ruling class, the landowners. They were dispossessed of their land and assets in the interwar period. In World War II, the Axis, the Nazis took over Yugoslavia, and then the guerrilla partisans led by the Communist Party of Yugoslavia defeated them along with the Allies. So Bosnia, here you can see where it sits geographically. It's bordered to the east by Serbia, north and west by Croatia, southeast Montenegro. We're very close to, you can see how close we are to Hungary, Austria, Italy. So while we were part of Yugoslavia, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Montenegro, Serbia, Macedonia, these were all just one country. So Yugoslavia bordered Italy and Austria and Hungary. Like I said, moderate continental climate with different terrains throughout the country. So my story, like I said, begins in a town called Jajce, which is an ancient royal city in Bosnia. It's renowned for this waterfall, and also it has one of the best preserved temples to the ancient Roman sun god Mithra from the 2nd century. This panel right here of the map, this is sort of when Bosnia peaked in 12th through 14th century when we were a kingdom. Our king Tvrtko took over a lot of the land that actually is present-day Croatia. So Bosnia on the west side included all of the, a lot of the Adriatic coast as well. And this is the ancient royal symbol of Bosnia, which was also the Bosnian lily, fleur de lis, which is a symbol of the Bosnian resistance to the Serbian occupation. So you will see Bosnian Muslims proudly wear the fleur de lis. That kind of, if I see somebody from that part of the world wearing that, I know a lot about them already. The town I grew up in is called Donji Vakuf. It's a beautiful little town. It had about 30,000 inhabitants before the war. It's known for its natural beauty, and it was a very diverse small town that had kind of no clear majority. Growing up, I had friends, Croatian Catholic, Serbian Orthodox, and obviously Bosnian Muslims. We were all friends. We all went to school together. The 1980s was a great decade until it wasn't. So here you can see our first president, Alija Izetbegovic, shaking a hand of this little boy on the horse. And I'll tell you a little bit about this festival. And you can see this line of pilgrims in between these two rocks. These rocks are 74 meters tall and 30 plus meters wide. And there's a legend, this is known as the Little Mecca of Europe, so in my town. And here are some religious leaders, imams, leading the procession of pilgrims, and there's lots of Muslims making sujood. This always takes place in end of June. And some beautiful Bosnian girls also attending traditional dress. So the festival is known as Ajvatovca. It is the largest Islamic traditional, religious, and cultural event in all of Europe. It is located near Donji Vakuf, which is where I lived. It was named after a religious, devout man called Ayvaz Dado. He was a pious Muslim who worked to enlighten the population and achieve progress in the area. So the rock that I mentioned, this rock up here, is very symbolic because this was one rock, a solid rock, and this Ibaz Dado, his town didn't have water. He discovered a spring of a river, but the rock was blocking the water, and he prayed tahajjud for 40 days in a row and made supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to please give water to his people, to his city. And on the 40th morning, after his prayers, he fell asleep and he dreamt of two rams colliding. And when those rams collided in his dreams, this rock split in two and water gushed forward. So it is truly miraculous. This happened in, I think, 1511, so early 16th century. And for hundreds of years, this was observed as a Muslim pilgrimage site, a holy site. But during the communist rule, when religion is the opium of the people, and people, especially Muslims, could not practice their religion openly without detriment to themselves and their families. For most of the 20th century, it was forbidden to acknowledge this event. So in 1990, it was the first time they resumed after almost 90 plus years. So anyway, I was in a powerful spring, 40 days beseeching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to split the rock. When he awoke, he saw the rock split in half. Wooden pipes were placed along the newly formed canyon to take water into Prusets, which is like a village just on the hills above the Lumbako. And seeing it as a sign of God's miracle and blessing, people began going on pilgrimages to the place where the rock had split. So you have Muslims from increasingly other parts of the world coming to make pilgrimage here as a holy site. So my town was occupied by the Serbian paramilitary forces at the very beginning of the war in April of 1992. All of the signs in the Latin alphabet were taken down, and everything in the Cyrillic replaced by signs in the Cyrillic. Donji Bakuf. Bakuf actually is I think Arabic word, Wakf, which is like a legacy or something. It was renamed into Srbobran with a very suggestive name. This is a picture of a Serbian paramilitary soldier. The mosque that I stealthily went to as a child was this mosque. It's right across my grandfather's house in the very center of the town. The mosque was completely destroyed and razed, leveled completely. Like 600 plus mosques were destroyed in Bosnia during this period. So it did not exist, I think, from mid 1992 until 1996. The town was liberated in September of 1995. The war ended in November of 1995 by the Dayton Accords. So the new mosque has been rebuilt. So this is the new mosque. It has a turquoise dome. It's beautiful. It's just maybe 50 yards from my house. So I have to give a shout out to my good friend, Mr. Irfan Mirza, who is married to Sabina, who is right here. She's a lady from my town, but Irfan Mirza wrote a wonderful book on the history of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and he's an American Muslim. He was born in India, but moved to the United States when he was just 2 years old. And he, even before he met his wife, he was a powerful CEO living in Beverly Hills in 1992, and he was just so struck by what was happening to the Bosnian people, Bosnian Muslims especially. He kind of left everything and just tried to help our people establish some ways to get medicines to people of Bosnia during the war, and that's how we met his wife. But I had the good fortune to meet him at their home in Seattle last year, and they also founded the Bosnian American Institute. He's a really an incredible person. So Bosnia has it's culturally very rich and complex. Like I mentioned, it has been inhabited by human beings since at least the late Paleolithic age. There's ample evidence that permanent human settlements were established during the Neolithic age. First, Europeans to populate the area were Illyrian and Celtic. You can see, a lot of red-headed Bosnians, especially Bosnian Muslims. Actually, one of the most famous redhead models in the world is Asima Sejdić, who is a Bosnian Muslim girl, young woman. And this just reiterates what I mentioned. There was also a study done in 2004 that found that Bosnian had genetic markers that placed their ancestors back to the last ice age. So, like, Bosnians are people who actually survived ice age, which is really incredible. So the Great Schism. So in 1054, kind of mid 11th century, as you know, this Great Schism of the Church split the main faction of Christianity into two divisions: the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox. And Bosnia is sort of in the very middle of kind of where it's split. So kind of like right here. So everything to the east is Orthodox. Everything to the west was Roman Catholic. And even today, these two remain the two largest denominations of Christianity. This Great Schism was caused by many factors, but the most important issues were the doctrinal differences between the Eastern and Western churches, the rejection of universal papal authority by Eastern patriarchs, and the growing socio-political differences between East and West. So Bosnia, kind of given where it is, Roman Catholics kind of had like other more important things to pay attention to. I guess we're kind of on the kind of very western frontier of where the Eastern Orthodoxy could reach. So it was sort of like the church was unstable, and a new church was actually established during the 11th and 13th century that was deemed as a heretical church, and crusades were launched against the Bosnian church by the Pope. So the new church was the Church of Bosnia, and they were actually Bogomil. They're called Bogomil Church. They're the dualists. At this time in France and Italy and in Bosnia, there were these a group of people who just started to question some of the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. They challenged the ecclesiastical hierarchy. They did not believe in the divinity of Jesus. They believed Jesus was, an angel, as was Virgin Mary, but not Son of God or God. This really bothered the Roman Catholic Church because the Roman Catholic Church sought to establish kind of universal beliefs, universal practice for both, king and peasant, and for people to worship the same, whether they were in London or Lisbon or in Bosnia or wherever. Like, they just wanted universal agreement. So, this trouble child in Bosnia, Bosnia was really bothering them. So the popes sanctioned 4 crusades against the Bosnian heretics, but it was mostly orchestrated by Hungary and Serbia as a political land grab. Many of these Bogomils were burned at stakes throughout Europe, including Bosnia. They were called Cathars in France and Catarines in Italy, but pretty much a dualist belief. And up here, you can see this throughout Bosnia. These are called stečaks. Stečaks are the graveyards of Bogomils. These are hundreds of years old, and they look completely different than Roman Catholic or Orthodox graveyards. So, introduction to Islam. Some people say even as early as 8th century, some of the tribes from the Khazars and tradesmen from Bulgaria and Arab lands, crossed the land and it just sort of passed through tribes. But the Ottomans really brought Islam to Bosnia, or to the Balkans. The Islamic tenets were attracted to Bogomils, mostly because of the Islam, I guess if you could boil it down to, is really a relationship between a person and God. There's no middleman. And that was very attractive to Bogomils because this hierarchy was bypassed and this direct relationship between the adherent and God was stressed. So Bosnians embraced Islam in large numbers in late 15th and 16th century. Like I said, Ottomans arrived in mid 1400s. They also appreciated the interest in the welfare of the poor, with the zakat, sadaqah, high moral values, integrity in business dealings. There was also influence. Well, I mean, they were the most powerful force in the world. So it was like we all want to be on the winning team. Generally, human beings like that. So there was absolutely influence due to economic and military superiority of the new occupying force. There was also socio-political incentives to convert to Islam, no question about that. Muslims could own land, they could be active in political life. There were a lot of perks to becoming Muslim. By the end of the 16th century, 2/3 of the Bosnian population was Muslim. So this is an indigenous European people embracing Islam just a few centuries after the Crusades. Really challenging the status quo. That is, Europe is Christendom, right? So this was kind of the scarlet letter for the Bosnian Muslims that to some degree persists to today, which explains the geopolitics. Just want to show this video really briefly. How are we doing on time? 14, okay.
15 minutes.
15 minutes should be. Very good video. That is, let's skip through some of them. Is audio working?
You have the audio.
Put the mic to the,
Super. Some 100. Do not hear it. Is it doing anything else? Even why the sound is not coming up after this block? In terms of, Oh. Sure, actually, yeah, that'd be great. So how did Bosnia become 50% Muslim? Yes. Say, okay, that's fine. All right, so we will just synchronize this and that. So I will hit start.
Earned itself a reputation as the land of Christians, even though the 11th and 16th centuries marked massive schisms within the faith. The European continent's ties to Christianity couldn't be severed, and as the Muslim Ottoman Empire pushed its way onto the Christian lands, the Europeans were not afraid to fight back against this new religion. Still, not every Christian remained as such, and some Europeans converted. Bosnia is a perfect example of this curious circumstance. This video is sponsored by Kamikoto, a Japanese steel knife brand. Steelmaking has been at the beating heart of Honshu, Japan's largest island, for more than 8 centuries. From traditional techniques with its distinctive layered patterns to iron processing and sword-smithing and metal casting, Japanese craft techniques have evolved and refined over the centuries. A process that takes several years from currently having their Black Friday offer, com/Montenegro,
I'll
and
take
essentially surrounded by Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox Christians. Within Bosnian borders, roughly half of the population is Muslim. Orthodox Christianity makes up around 31% of the population, followed by Roman Catholics at 15%. But with so much Christian influence from all around, why does Bosnia still have so many Muslims? The Islamization of Bosnia can actually be traced back to before the first entry of the Ottoman Empire. Although Islam was yet to be introduced to the area, Bosnia was not quite as Christian as any of its neighbors had been, and this made it much more open to welcoming a new faith. Back when the Christians began to send missions throughout the Balkans in the 9th century, Bosnia appears to have been a bit neglected during the process. At first, the See of Rome and the See of Constantinople tried to divide the Balkans between each side's sphere of influence. But once the Great Schism occurred in 1054, the presence of Catholicism and Orthodoxy became more clear-cut and split, with the Catholics dominating Croatia and the Orthodox doing the same in Serbia. The intention was to nominally leave Bosnia to the Roman Catholics, but the faith never really had strong enough roots to make the Bosnians loyal to the Western Church, and since the Eastern Church hadn't tried much either, the region ended up being a weird echo of the neighboring faith. The Orthodox Church did eventually get a bit of a foothold, but the Catholics were no longer their only competition. By now, an unofficial Bosnian church had been established that would eventually become fully independent of both East and West, and for now began to encroach upon the Catholic influence in the center, north, and west of Bosnia. This quickly became a problem for Rome. In 1199, the neighboring ruler Vukan wrote a letter to Pope Innocent III, expressing his concerns for what he viewed as a heretical church and people, including the Bosnian leader Kulin himself. Accusations began to mount against the ruler over the next couple of years as multiple authoritarian figures, including the King of Hungary himself, joined the wave of critics. Kulin soon tried to quell the brewing tensions by reaffirming his loyalty to the Catholic faith and practice, but not much was done back in the Bosnian Church to prove that. After Kulin's death in 1216, Romans sent a new mission into Bosnia to try and reconvert the locals, but their preaching fell on deaf ears. Angered by this and backed by the Hungarians, who were eager to expand their own authority into Bosnia, the new Pope, Pope Honorius III, called for a Hungarian crusade into Bosnia as a punishment for what the West still deemed as heresy. Between 1225 and 1250, multiple crusades would be attempted and shut down by the Bosnians. While Pope Gregory IX ousted the Catholic Bishop of Bosnia in 1234 for being a supposed heretic. In 1252, now under Pope Innocent IV, Rome tried to place the Bishop of Bosnia under the hand of the Hungarians, which swiftly prompted anger and refusal from the locals. Many Bosnians now denounced Catholicism and solidified the existence of the independent Bosnian Church. This predictably created even more conflict between Rome and Bosnia, which would continue on and off for some time. During this era, the Bosnians became targets of both the Western and Eastern churches, and many were persecuted by the surrounding faiths, which viewed them as heretical. This created a situation unlike what could be found in the rest of the Balkans. In Bosnia, neither Rome nor Constantinople could be trusted, and that meant that, for many, neither could the faiths. This left the Bosnian Church as the only reliable option, but the church was still young and with a stained reputation. The Ottoman Turks began their conquest of Bosnia in the 1380s and took the first step in introducing Islam to the region. Still, just as they had done when the Hungarians launched their crusade, the Bosnians fought valiantly against their invaders. Their disloyalty to the authority in Rome and Constantinople may have affected the religious life of Bosnia, but it surely didn't mean that the locals were open to being conquered. Subsequently, the Ottoman campaign lasted for decades, as the Bosnians simply refused to give in. By 1451, the Turks were able to set up a military administrative unit, but it wouldn't be until 1463 that the Kingdom of Bosnia would really fall into Ottoman hands. At first, this successful conquest was not an automatic trigger for Bosnians converting to Islam. One of the reasons why the Ottoman Empire had been able to expand as much as it did was because of its ethnic and religious tolerance, which would therefore be put into place in captured Bosnia as well.
So I think you get. I just wanted to relay the point that another church existed, and it was Bosnian Church, and it was deemed heretical, and for many reasons, the adherents to the Bosnian Church were very receptive through the centuries to accepting Islam. Here are some examples of classic Ottoman architecture in Bosnia. Bosnia is so beautiful. So it was sort of like the playground of the sultans. It was the westernmost, it's the westernmost province of, I guess, Ottoman Empire, and they also wanted to just beautify it. They built schools, madrasas, seminaries, beautiful mosques, and I guess wanted to just really assert, hey, we are here in the heart of Europe. Okay, the Ottoman Empire really started declining in the late 19th century. This is a front page of, I guess, one of the main French journals at the time, how they are dividing the Treaty of Berlin, divided the country, and the Austro-Hungarians, you can see they're kind of pulling the Bosnia and Herzegovina their way, and Turkey is now empty-handed. World War I triggered in Sarajevo. This is Gavrilo Princip. If you visit Sarajevo, you will know exactly where the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was assassinated, including his pregnant wife. Here's Gavrilo Princip shooting at the woman and the man. This, you had to stand up and pick sides. So you had Russia, France, Britain, and Serbia on one side, and you had the Austro-Hungarian, Germany, Italy on one side. In between the World War I and World War II, Bosnia and Herzegovina was part of the initially Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. This is really when the deliberate erasure of Bosnian Muslim identity occurred. My ancestors had to pick, you couldn't really say you're Bosnian Muslim. They wanted to erase Bosnia, even though it existed for centuries. You had to pick one of these and say, I'm actually a Croat, or I'm a Slovene, or I'm a Serb. Again, massive dispossession of land and assets. Essentially, the land from the landowners was given to the people who worked the land. So the feudal system was dismantled. After World War II, Bosnia and Herzegovina was granted full republic status in the newly formed Socialist Federalist Republic of Yugoslavia. So this was Yugoslavia. You can see Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, and also Macedonia. This country no longer exists. That's Tito. Tito is a cult figure for everybody from Yugoslavia, born to a Croat father, Slovene mother. He was drafted into military service and quickly distinguished himself. He was the youngest sergeant major in the Austro-Hungarian army. He was seriously wounded and captured by the Russians in World War I and was a prisoner in one of their labor camps in the Ural Mountains. After his release, he became the leader of the Yugoslav Communist Army. He led the Yugoslav guerrilla movement to defeat the Nazis. This guerrilla movement is called Partisans. And they took, the Allies helped and they took power over Yugoslavia. He was the chief architect of Socialist Federalist Republic of Yugoslavia. He also defied Stalin. There were multiple assassination attempts by Stalin on him. He was kind of a problem child for Stalin because he just didn't really want to follow suit. Stalin would say jump. He wouldn't say how high. He just would jump. So that bothered Stalin a lot. So he wanted a model of socialist self-management in which everything was kind of state-owned and workers ran all the firms and workers were entitled to an equal share of the profits. Kept ethnic tensions under control. He envisaged Yugoslavia as a federal republic of equal nations and nationalities, freely united on the principle of so-called brotherhood and unity. You know, as a child, I had to sing all of these songs about brotherhood and unity, achieving specific and common interests. Unfortunately, 12 years, he died in May of 1980, just a few months before I was born. 12 years after his death, the country that he built and kept in place was dissolved. Here are some, I'm sorry, I skipped the slideshow. Some pictures. You know, he was a very popular leader. Mingled with the Queen of England and President Nixon and all of the leaders in the world. He, like I said, Joseph Stalin tried to assassinate him multiple times. And Tito wrote Stalin a letter that says, "Stop sending people trying to kill me. We already captured 5 of them. One of them with a bomb and another with a rifle. If you don't stop sending killers, I will send one to Moscow and I will not need to send a second one. I'm the leader of a country which has 2 alphabets, 3 languages, 4 religions, 5 nationalities, 6 republics, surrounded by 7 neighbors, a country in which live 8 ethnic minorities." When he died, it was tragic. He was a cult figure, cult following to this day to some extent. So 9 years later, in 1989, the Berlin Wall went down. Communism was ending in Eastern Europe. Slobodan Milosevic, who was the leader of the Serbian Communist Party, an avowed atheist, leveraged 500 years of kind of ethnic tensions and used religion to divide the people and made Muslims as a scapegoat. He addressed 500,000 Serbs in Kosovo on the Vidovdan Day, St. Vitus Day, and this is a very important part of national identity for Serbian people. Many notable events in their history falling on that day. Is the day they declared war on the Ottoman Empire. Is the day that Gavrilo Princip assassinated Franz Ferdinand, and also in 1989, 600th anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo, when the Ottomans defeated Serbs. He delivered a speech, essentially inciting nationalistic hatred and division. This is a depiction of the Battle of Kosovo. So this is sort of, I would say, Battle of Kosovo is to our what Karbala is to our Shia brothers and sisters. Battle of Kosovo is to Serbs. Breakup of Yugoslavia. This is from United States National Intelligence, a memo from 1990 that says Yugoslavia will cease to function. This is 2 years before. Will cease to function as a federal state within 1 year, and will probably dissolve within 2. A full-scale inter-republic war is unlikely, but serious intercommunal conflict will accompany the breakup. The violence will be intractable and bitter. There is little the United States and its European allies can do to preserve Yugoslavian unity. So Bosnia declared independence in October of 91. In spring of 1992, Bosnian Muslims were attacked. You've seen these pictures, the concentration camps, the sniper alley, little children affected. This right here is a graveyard of more than 7,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys aged 7 to 77 who were killed over a period of 2 days in Srebrenica. The country was destroyed. Multiple mass graves of Bosnian Muslims have been discovered, just en masse, buried underground. To this day, they are finding mass graves. It was premeditated genocide in Srebrenica and elsewhere. the goal was ethnic cleansing of Bosnian Muslims. The war was ended by the Dayton Accords. So Dayton, Ohio, historic, November 1995. My family was in Toledo at that time. And there's Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, Bosnia was he wanted, before his term ended, he wanted this war to be finished. This is our president, Alija Izetbegovic, Slobodan Milosevic, Franjo Tuđman of Croatia. It's still a frozen conflict. Here we are 30 years later. Bosnia, so the Dayton Accords effectively divided the country into two parts, 49% and 51%. 49% belongs to the Serbs, and 51% is shared by Muslims and Catholics or Croats. It's a frozen conflict, and so you can see right here how the country is divided. My hometown is right in the middle of this federation. The Bosnian Serb leader, the man in blue suit, is essentially a puppet of Vladimir Putin. And the goal, ultimately, they're constantly threatening secession. The goal is to join the Serbian Republic to Serbia. Serbia wants to annex that towards the goal of Greater Serbia, which it's a land grab issue. So this is just headlines from just a couple months ago. It's just constant. Almost 30 years later, Europe's forgotten conflict that threatens the survival of Bosnia. How broken politics in Bosnia is going to lead to war. Europe is watching as a crisis is slowly developing in Bosnia with the suspicion that Russia is stirring things up. So to close, hopefully that will not deter you from visiting. It's a really beautiful place, so much to offer in many respects. I think you will return a changed person if you go, and you will truly provide moral and economic support to the people of Bosnia if you visit. Thank you. So much.
Did you, questions or
Any
comments?
questions? Maybe 5 minutes for
We
questions.
have about 5 minutes. Sure. Sure, let me get the mic.
So if we go today, can we move freely? I'm sure there's no problems like that. So what are the main attractions? Can you talk a little bit about the economy, what have you?
Sure. Absolutely, you can move freely. I think when the economy is supported, I think people just sort of don't pay as much attention to these ethnic divisions. But nowadays, especially the Muslim tourism is thriving. If you know Salim and Saba Zafar, they just came back from Bosnia. They said it was one of their best vacations ever. They definitely want to go back. So the main attractions are obviously the capital city, Sarajevo. I mentioned the reference that is called Little Baby Jerusalem or European Jerusalem, but it's also kind of like visiting Istanbul and Vienna at the same time because of all the Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian influence that you see in the architecture, in the cafes, and the food, really. So there's that, and some of the day trips to the town I was born in and some other places in Bosnia are also very popular for the Muslims. Usually there's a day trip to Srebrenica, and they'll pay homage to all the victims of that genocide. And it's kind of like visiting Auschwitz. It's our Auschwitz. Srebrenica is our Auschwitz. Economy right now, it's mostly industry and tourism.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was lovely, very informative. I'm interested in the languages. How much impact did the Turkish language impact the language of the Muslims, especially in the area.
Other than a computer, we should buy another microphone.
It is, that's
You know,
it,
we'll
yeah.
get tired of
So the
walking.
question was, the language legacy of the 450 plus years of Ottoman rule. Actually, there's about 550 Turkic words in the Bosnian / Serbian / Croatian language, mostly Bosnian and Serbian.
Is Turkish spoken?
No, no. So Bosnian language or Serbo-Croatian is a Slavic language. So, if I count to 10, it sounds almost the same as like if a Russian person counts to 10, or a Polish or a Czech or Slovak.
So
It's a Slavic
Croatians
language.
and Bosnians, all those ethnic patchwork, they speak the same language?
Same language like 95% of the time. So after the war, Croatians in particular have invented new words for common things like airplane or passport or train station. So, but you really, like the politicians, when they meet, they do not need a translator. Now, Serbs they don't use the Latin alphabet. They use the Cyrillic, Bosnian Cyrillic alphabet, which everybody who did their primary education in Bosnia knows how to read both.
Any other comments or questions? Ahmad?
Not right now.
If you have positive comment, just do it. If negative, don't. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
It was lovely. Okay, I already told you about next Sunday. So it's time for Zohar prayers.